What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the First Team Fantasy Podcast. We are going to be going over the London game as well as our morning games, and in part two, our next episode, we'll cover the afternoon games as well as the Sunday night. To kick it off, we had the Jaguars play the Bills in London, and the Jaguars got to spend the whole week in London after playing their last week, and it kind of showed. The Bills flew in, I believe it was either Thursday or Friday, and they came out jet lagged for sure. The Jaguars' offensive side of the ball, they won the game 25-20. They actually, their stats look better than the 25 points they put up. The Bills' defense played phenomenal, and they were shorthanded. The Bills' offense just through the game did not give them any rest or kind of help them out until, super late in the game. The Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence had a very efficient game, 25 of 37, 315 yards, threw a touchdown, rushed for 31 yards. Only finished 15.7 fantasy points because he only did have one touchdown, but by far this was the best Trevor Lawrence has looked this season. He came out ready to play. Travis Etienne carried that offense. He looked incredible in this
He looked
game.
great against a really good defense.
Yeah, and they workloaded him like crazy. He had 26 carries, 136 yards, two touchdowns, four catches on five targets for another 48 yards. He finished 36.4 fantasy points. He was the running back one on the week against a Bills defense that's impressive. ETN owners, that is a huge bright spot. Coming into the season, we thought, or they kind of made it seem like Tank Bigsby was going to have a role in this offense, and he just has not. So as long as ETN's healthy, he is getting everything on the rushing side of the ball, and the receiving side of the ball from the running back position as well. The receivers had very solid weeks. Calvin Ridley, kind of a bounce back week for him. He had that huge
He's
week one,
back.
and then he had some rough weeks. He is back. He had 8 targets, caught seven of them, 122 yards, finished 20.6 fantasy points, and that's why people drafted him in the third, early fourth round for games like that. Now it's how consistent can we see it from Calvin after the Jaguars bounce back against a Bills defense? I mean, you would hope that this offense gets back on track if ETN's running the ball like that. It's easier to pass. I mean, it was it was a showcase on the offensive side of the ball. Christian Kirk
Yeah.
had 8 targets, caught six of them, 78 yards, 14.4 fantasy points, and he was getting drafted pretty late after how well he did last season with Ridley coming back. They were pretty low on Kirk, and other than week one, Christian Kirk 14.4 is very solid. Especially you
Oh yeah.
probably drafted him as your wide receiver 3. That is, I mean, Christian Kirk is going to be their most consistent wide receiver week in and week out, especially with Zay Jones. He re-aggravated his knee. He played 43% of snaps, and when he was in, they use him. He had 5 targets, 3 catches, 23 yards, including a touchdown, 11.3 fantasy points. In 43% of snaps, he gets used when he's out there, but again, he re-aggravated the knee injury. Don't have a crazy update on that yet. I'm sure we'll get one in the next couple days and obviously report out. But, worth noting if Zay Jones does miss time, just boost the stock of everyone else on that offense. And we actually saw our most quiet game from Evan Ingram. He had the 8 targets, so he's still getting the targets that we expect from him. He had 4 catches, 28 yards, finished 6.8 fantasy points. It was his first single digit week since week one. I'm not worried about it at all. The Bills have a good defense. The Jaguars were able to run the ball down their throat. They were able to get the ball around to all their main targets. Again, Ingram gets 8 targets. If he finishes 6.8 fantasy points for a tight end, that's not even a terrible week. But Evan Ingram's still a guy you're starting week in and week out.
Yeah. Just the tough thing about the Jags is like they're not going to force feed anyone the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if someone's open, Lawrence is going to try to hit him. And if the run game's working, Doug Peterson isn't stupid enough to go away from it.
Hmm.
That's one thing, you know, I like about Peterson, that if something's working, he continues to do it, unlike some of the other coaches, Harbaugh. But, you know, it's good to see when, like, ETN's eating against a really good defense. I have ultimate confidence in him throughout the rest of the year. Trevor Lawrence, definitely, like, for the rest of the season, I have a lot of confidence in him after watching, like, you know, the box score. I mean, no, even the box score, like the 300 yards, it looks good. Just the fantasy points aren't going to look good with only the one touchdown.
Hmm.
But you figure that's good. That's just because, I mean, hell, when ETN gets 2 on the ground, you scored 3 touchdowns against the Bills. You can't ask for too much more. So I think there will be much better weeks to come for Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, and I'd agree with it. And like he said, the Jaguars are very good at spreading the ball through the air on offense. I mean, ETN 5 targets, Ridley 8, Kirk 8, Zay Jones 5, and only 43% of snaps. Evan Ingram 8. Everyone's getting a piece of the pie, and it's one of those offenses that the pie's big enough for everyone to get a piece. It's a very healthy piece for every single person. All those guys we listed, even Zay Jones, if he comes back healthy, he's a guy I don't mind throwing at the flex. They just have
No.
weapons everywhere. And on the other side of the ball, ooh, it was a rough week. The Bills came out with 3 consecutive 3-and-outs. I mean, for this high-powered offense, that's not something I expected. But come the end of the game, Josh Allen, fantasy owners, he did have an incredible game fantasy-wise. Um, 27 of 40, 359 yards, 2 touchdowns, an interception, 14 yards on the ground, another touchdown there, 28.76 fantasy points. I mean, it's Josh Allen. You drafted him as either the 1, 2, or 3 quarterback, depending how you felt. And he continues to show he is that. There's not much to touch on with him. He is a must start every single week. That's obvious. The
Mhm.
targets through the air, you have your 2 main guys. Stephon Diggs, he finished 11 targets, 8 catches, 121 yards, a touchdown, 24 fantasy points. Gabe Davis, he actually looked pretty good this game. He had a couple catches where I was like, wow, I cannot believe he came down with that. He
That
had
one where he jumped like 3.5 feet in the air
and
on the
got the feed
sideline
in.
and got his.
That was, yeah.
Gabe Davis, man,
I
that was
mean,
nasty.
Gabe Davis
That
caught a
was nasty.
touchdown. They brought it back and then threw it to Gabe Davis, and he caught a
And he
touchdown
catches
again,
it
back to
again.
back plays. So, I mean,
He's like, I'm getting this touchdown to Gabe Davis.
yeah, and he had a great game. 8 targets, 6 catches, or 100 yards flat. He had the touchdown, 22 fantasy points. Realistically, they're the only 2 real fantasy threats through the air, at least as of now. You have like a Deontay Hardy, a Khalil Shakur, who kind of come in as like the 3 wide receiver. Hardy
The
had
little gadget guys.
yeah, and Hardy had a big catch, but it none of them I'm even rostering. I mean,
Yeah, it's like if you call back to last year, it's like the Isaiah McKenzie rule. There
mhm.
will be games where they have a big blow up, and it's kind of like we say for some of the guys. If you have them in best ball, great. Never making a choice to start one of those guys on any given week.
No, and it's the same for the tight ends. Dawson Knox and Kincaid again. Knox finished 4.7 fantasy points, Kincaid 3.9. Knox was out there 70% of snaps, Kincaid 53. It's just
Kincaid did go out with a concussion in this one, and
yeah,
I know that unfortunately it was. I had him for 3 catches. He goes out after he gets 2. That was very painful.
yeah. So I mean that's a super bad beat, but it's just as long as they're both in there, I'm not thinking about starting either of them. Uh,
Nah, I mean, while Kincaid may be more skilled and even more akin to a slot receiver than a tight end, Josh Allen's been throwing to Dawson Knox for a few years now. He's very comfortable with it. So it's going to be hard for him to separate himself as long as Dawson Knox is out there.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, yeah, the Bills, what you expected through the air, your Diggs, Davis, Josh Allen throwing the ball, got the job done. The running game, on the other hand, got absolutely nothing done. James Cook, who's the lead back there, 5 carries, -4 yards, 4 targets, 3 receptions, 25 yards, which I'm going to say salvaged his fantasy day because if he didn't get those catches, he had negative points. But
Yeah, he would have finished under Latavius Murray, which you never want to see on any given week.
yeah.
But
So, yeah, James Cook finished 5.1 fantasy points. The only bright spot I see from it is he did play 62% of snaps. Latavius' snap count was a bit down this week. He actually had the same as Damian Harris. And to be honest, Damian Harris looked the best running the ball. They had the most success with him running the ball, and that wasn't even that much success. So
no,
it was a horrible week running the ball for the Bills, which I didn't completely expect. The Jaguars didn't have the greatest rush defense, but it is
no,
what
I
it
mean, we
is.
saw Bijan explode last week against them.
Yeah, so and that could have been a big reason that hurt the Bills. You know, they just could not establish anything on the ground, so they had to pass the entire game basically. But the Bills had 10 total carries as a team. That just tells you kind of how the game plan was. When you look at
Were those including Josh Allen's carries?
Oh, okay. No, sorry. 14 total carries.
Okay,
10
I was
total
gonna
carries
say,
from the
damn.
backs. No, that's a
Yeah,
very good point. But when you just look at, the Jaguars just dominated possession of the ball when you're looking at 37 passes from Trevor
yeah.
Lawrence, 7 carries, and then another 26 from ETN, and then you get to the Bills side of the ball and it's Josh Allen 40 passes but in 4 carries and then 10 from the RBs. The Jags had the ball most of the game. They dominated
Yeah, they
possession.
really did.
it it honestly, the Bills were lucky to get out of this game only losing by 5. If you got up early to watch that game, it looked worse
Ooh.
than what that final score says. Um,
Yeah, time of possession in this one was 38 minutes 12 seconds for the Jags and 21 minutes 48 seconds for the Bills.
yeah, they dominated, and the Bills' defense, I'm going to keep crediting them because they did look good. They gave it everything they had. At some point, they broke a little bit, and ETN had a couple big carries, but you can't blame them when they were just out there for so long. Even when the
They
Bills
were.
scored, they scored in 45 seconds. And then
Yeah.
your defense is going right back out there. So only so
Yeah.
much you can expect. But that's,
29 total rushing yards as a team.
yeah. And Josh Allen had 14 of them. Yeah. So it is what it is. That's all I had to touch. I still like James Cook going forward. He's still the lead back there. He's getting targets out the
Yeah.
backfield, but it was a super rough week. He's still a guy I'm
You
starting.
just know, yeah, you just know that this is within his range of outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as it sucks, we've seen the possibility of it. Last week, he was only on the field 40% of the time. Didn't save his day, but he got that touchdown on the one and got that 48-yard reception. So it's just like without some of these things, we see what the week could look like. But
Mm-hmm.
given the offense that he's on, we still have to remember he's on a Bills offense that is scoring buku amounts of points every week. Like it will be fine. There's going to be much better weeks. One thing that I did want to touch on was I've heard a lot of noise about Gabe Davis, even given like his big week, like, oh, he's still boom or bust. I don't know if you could really trust him. And I want to call BS on that just because right now Josh Allen is the quarterback one. And we've seen in the past 3 games, he likes to throw to Gabe Davis in the end zone.
Mm-hmm.
He is a solidified end zone. It's like not, yeah, he's touchdown dependent. Well, if he's the Bills are always in position to score in every game. They have opportunities to score a bunch of points. And Gabe Davis is a guy he seems to trust a whole lot. And like I mentioned before, they talked about how in camp he was catching everything. He goes up and makes that incredible catch on the side. Like Gabe
Yeah.
Davis is not a guy that I'm like, I don't know. It's like I'm putting him in my lineup every week whenever I can, especially if the matchup is good. And this wasn't even the greatest matchup.
Yeah.
So Gabe Davis, I'm rolling with.
Yeah. 100% agree. 100%.
Yeah, and then you got anything else for that one?
No, we're good to roll.
All right, we're going to take it to Miami where the Giants lost. I mean, there's not really too much to say about this team. The their only touchdown was on defense, and it was a 102-yard pick six.
Yeah.
Daniel Jones, you could say what you want about the guy. The Giants shouldn't have paid him, this, that, and the third. We all know the real issue is this New York Giants offensive line. Daniel Jones got sacked 17 times in these past 2 games. This game, he couldn't even make it through the whole game. He went out with a neck injury. They had to bring in Tyrod Taylor. I mean, there's nothing the guy can do back there. It really does make me concerned for when Saquon Barkley comes back, especially depending on how much time Daniel Jones is going to miss. I mean, it's not like saying like, oh, Tyrod Taylor's so much worse. But if Daniel Jones can't even breathe for 2 seconds after that ball is snapped, I just don't see too much going. I mean, Saquon might be saved by a lot of dump offs and quick passes because, as we've seen, everything is fairly close to the line of scrimmage for the Giants because there's just no time to let anything develop.
Mm-hmm.
But damn, I'm concerned. I mean, the one thing good that we saw in this game was Darren Waller is back. He got 8 catches on 11 targets, 86 yards. I mean, he showed in this game what we wanted to see. This is why the Giants got him. Like, he is going to be the number 1 target on that team. But again, to mention, I don't know how. I mean, after the game, he said his neck was sore. We all know you can't trust too much what a player says, especially immediately following the game. You kind of have to give it some time. So we'll retouch on that when we get to our injury episode. But I'm definitely really concerned with this whole entire team just because, well, I don't know exactly what it'll look like. I think Tyrod Taylor's still capable of getting Wally the ball. But like I said, he's an even older quarterback. It's terrible. How much time is he going to have?
Yeah.
But yeah, Waller finished with 16.6 PPR points. Daniel, he only played 68% of the snaps in this game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know I'm repeating myself, but it just really concerns me what's going to happen with an older quarterback behind a line that's getting Daniel Jones, who's very athletic. He is a very skilled athlete, and he's getting killed. Matt Breida, we saw kind of the end of any relevance for him.
Yeah.
He played 58% of the snaps. I didn't see anything about him getting hurt. Gave up 42% of the snaps to Eric Gray. Neither one of them had the relevant fantasy performance. Breida didn't even score 5 points this week. I mean, he's done. I wouldn't really consider you. This was a decent matchup against defense. They are not particularly good against the run, and he was still inefficient as could be. So if Saquon remains out, not interested in Breida. And then as far as the Giants wide receiver room goes, the only guy I had any remote interest in was Wan'Dale Robinson. I mean, he got 6 targets. No other receiver got more than 2 on that team. But like I said, the low ADOT stuff, I mean, he caught 5 passes for 18 yards. And there's just not much we can do with that when there's guys like Josh Downs out there. There's just more to look at when I just don't much, but I've spent enough time talking about the Giants onto a much better team. The Dolphins put up 31 points. You love to see it. You had a great game out of Reek. 8 for 9, 181 yards and a touchdown. That's 32.1 PPR points.
Mm-hmm.
Waddle was not bad, but you would have liked to see a little bit more. He was 10 targets, only caught 5 of them for 35, and a touchdown, still gave you 14.5 in PPR. But Waddle hasn't necessarily given you what you've wanted up to this point. Still a guy that if you can go out and trade for just because his production hasn't been at that level yet, definitely a guy like in a top offense in the league. But aside from that, in the wide receiver room, I mean, we weren't sure if it was gonna if it was gonna be what's his name? Braxton Berrios is the wide receiver 3 or Robbie Chosen. This week it was Cedric Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
It's just one of those things. After the top 2, I'm not really looking for anyone. I mean, Cedric Wilson in this game played 54% of the snaps. Robbie Chosen played 19. Braxton Berrios played 37. And Chase Claypool's coming. So that's just going to muddle it even more.
Yeah.
Not that we were too interested in anybody but Reek and Waddle in that wide receiver room, anyways. But I mean, hell, if you want to take a shot on Durham Smythe one week, he's playing 81% of the snaps on an offense that's scoring a lot. Still, he's not really him to be, so I really prefer that option. But, you know, what you guys have been waiting for, the Miami Dolphin running back, Devon Achane. This guy is a world beater, league winner, whatever you want to call him.
Mm-hmm.
He's great. I
Yeah.
mean, it's funny because he, in this game, plays 48% of the snaps. Raheem Mostert gets 59. He plays 6 less snaps than Raheem Mostert, but gets 1 more rush. 151 yards on 11 rushes. Raheem got 65 on 10. You know how fast Raheem Mostert is. This guy is so... just wow.
Crazy
Every
explosive.
time you watch him, it's like, how is he this fast?
Yeah.
He made fun of Tyreek for getting caught on that long pass. He's like, I don't care if you run 22 miles per hour. You got hawked down. I didn't get hawked down. It's like, oh, dude, this kid is gold. I mean, forget Jeff Wilson Jr. coming back. Even when he does, like, Achane is a guy who we talk, like, when we talk about things like doing the most with their touches, that is the definition of it.
Yep.
Every time he touches the ball, it's like he's shot out of a cannon and just magnified by 10. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's great. If you happen to pick him up on the waivers, good for you. But they both running backs fumbled once in this one, which hurt their value a little bit. That's 3 fumbles in 2 weeks for Mostert. To me, I think those snaps are going to start moving the other way a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, Mostert is still a guy you can start just due to the fact that they've shown they're not going to just keep one guy out there the whole time. Mostert's very fast. We saw the week before in the Bills game that catch that Mostert went up and made between 2. He's a very skilled football player. He's going to keep scoring touchdowns. Had another one in this game. 15.8 fantasy points for Mostert. And, I mean, when you're getting this kind of production from 2 running backs, start them both. It's not that hard. It's like Puka and Cooper Kupp. You're starting both of them. Mm-hmm. If you have Cooper Kupp, you're starting him. If you have Puka, you're starting him. You have Mostert, you're starting him. Same with Achane. It's very simple, something that should not be complicated. But, yeah, that's really all I got for this one if you have anything to add.
No, I mean...
Tua was 22 for 30, 308, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks, 18.9. I mean, you know what you get out of Tua.
Yeah, you have your must-starts. You have Tyreek, you have Waddle, you have Achane at this point. You have Tua. Mostert, when Jeff Wilson does come back, I assume he's going to get some workload. What that capacity will be, I'm not sure. But I think that workload will affect Mostert more than it will affect Achane, especially at this point. Even if you do see that snap percentage drop slightly for Achane, for Mostert, because Wilson gets, whatever carries, 5 carries, he's playing 20% of snaps, whatever the case. We've seen what Achane does with those opportunities, and I think his upside, obviously, at this point, is higher than Mostert's. Yeah. Just something to monitor. I still like Mostert a lot. Like you said, it's one of the few backfields at this point where you can start both running backs week in and week out and feel confident they're going to get you double digits. So, I mean, the Dolphins' offense just looks the most explosive in the NFL. I mean, deep balls, crazy big plays. Like, they're just week in and week out. Even when they got stifled against the Bills, you still saw, in that first half at least, crazy big plays. So, I mean, I love everything on Miami's offense, except the tight end position, really.
Yeah, I can't really count on that. Yeah, it's pretty funny because you'd think like, oh, I could start. No, you can't.
No.
But, yeah, and then as far as Jeff Wilson, it was weird because at one point they said they weren't sure if he was going to play, and they're like, oh, once he comes off IR, he'll be good. So I'm not really sure like at what stage he's at with that injury. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if he'll come back and right away, start getting a decent workload, or if they're going to work him in and how long that's going to take. So for the, at least the next few weeks, Raheem is still a great start.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that'll take us to our next game, where the Texans flew to Atlanta to take on the Falcons and lost in a close game. The Falcons escaped 21-19. The Texans side of the ball, you know, it wasn't the greatest offensive game. CJ Stroud still has not thrown an interception. Um, 20 of 35, 249 yards, and a touchdown, finished 14 fantasy points. Again, he's a guy we've said he's on the border of if I like starting him fantasy, depending on the bye, depending on the waiver, things like that. This matchup specifically, the Falcons are very good against the pass. They're not as good against the run, so didn't necessarily like his start this week. And I mean, he had a decent game, but nothing to, pop your eyes at, fantasy wise at least. Um, Damian Pierce, I honestly expected a little more from on the ground just because the Falcons aren't the greatest against the rush. He got the volume. He had 20 carries for 66 yards, only saw one reception on one target, 16 yards, finished 9.2 fantasy points, 59% of the snaps. I mean, he's a guy I'm waiting to see if they're eventually going to ramp up that workload more to a 65-70% mark. I still like him. He's getting all the carrying volume there. He's the only viable running back there. I mean,
Yeah.
but just 9.2 wasn't a great week. He's still a guy I like starting, but again, single digits
Yeah,
against that defense, I kind of expected a little more.
there will be better weeks. I mean, they had trouble getting in the end zone, trouble scoring. And if the running back's not breaking off big runs, it's probably going to look pretty bleak as far as the fantasy outcome.
Yeah, and then the receiving room, kind of a quiet day. Tank Dell had 3 catches for 57 yards on 4 targets for 8.3 fantasy points before he left with a concussion. He only played 36% of snaps and already had 8.3, 57 yards, 3 catches. So I mean, he was on pace for a very good fantasy week. Sucks to see him leave with a concussion. A young receiver. He'll probably miss next week, but again, Tank Dell healthy. I like the start just because of how explosive he is. Nico Collins, we saw cool off very heavily this week. He only had 3 catches on 4 targets for 39 yards, 6.9 fantasy points. Especially if Tank Dell does miss next week, I like the Nico Collins start. But again, it is a tough pass defense. I mean, there's not too much more to harp on in regards to that. Robert Woods saw the most targets in that receiver room. He saw 9 targets. Now, what he did with those targets was not very much at all. He only had 3 catches for 30 yards, 6 fantasy points, played 67% of snaps. He left the game with a rib injury, but did return to the game, and he still played 67% of snaps. So, I mean, he didn't miss too much of the game. And when you see 9 targets and 67% of snaps, you think it's going to be a great week, but with only 3 catches, 30 yards, I mean, all single-digit weeks for the first time for Texans receivers on the season.
Yeah. I mean, if there was a week it was going to happen, we saw, basically, outside from the Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram performance, actually, did Dalton Schultz do kind of okay this week?
Yeah, and that was going to be the next player I touched on. Dalton Schultz did have a very good week. He had 7 catches for 65 yards on 10 targets. He had the touchdown, 19.5 fantasy points. The second game in a row, he caught a touchdown. Second game in a row, he broke double-digit fantasy points. The first 3 weeks, he did not. He only played 59% of snaps, and it was a week where, the Falcons secondary is very good, kind of locked up the receivers, and Dalton Schultz was open. I mean,
yeah, this is 2 weeks in a row that we've seen tight ends kind of have a good game against that Falcons defense. I'm trying to recall who they played in the week prior to that. If it was the Saints tight end is
the Falcons played the Jaguars in London last week.
No, yeah. But the week prior to that, I think they played the Saints. And,
they don't really have a viable. But, yeah, again, Dalton Schultz broke double digits second game in a row. This is the first time we've really seen him get a crazy amount of volume. Last week when he broke double digits, he only had 3 targets but caught all 3 for 42 yards. Something to look at. Saints have a solid defense. We'll see how it plays out. I still think there's probably better tight end options, especially coming into week 6, but we'll keep an eye on it. Props to Dalton Schultz. Had another solid game.
Yeah.
The Atlanta side of the ball, I was surprised to see probably the best game we've seen from Desmond Ridder so far, surprisingly. He was 28 of 37, 329 yards, a touchdown, another touchdown on the ground,
That
26.1.
one right there. That's the one. That's the one. It's like Desmond Ridder, never do that shit again. People did not pick Bijan Robinson in the first round for you to run a touchdown. No more. No more.
Yeah.
Arthur Smith, we're coming for your head.
Yeah. So
Continue.
Desmond Ridder had 26 fantasy points. He's obviously not a guy we're starting. For Drake London, Kyle Pitts owners, we're happy about that he was able to get it done. And it was kind of weird because these defenses were very similar. The Texans have been very good against the pass, kind of middle of the pack against the run, and they bottled up Bijan a little bit. He had 14 carries for 46 yards, 2 catches on 2 targets, 12 yards. He did get a receiving touchdown, which realistically saved his fantasy day.
God. And let's be honest, if you watched that touchdown, yes, Desmond Ridder still sucks. He couldn't even throw the ball in front of Bijan. Bijan
Caught
had
it
to,
behind
reach
him.
behind him, catch it with one hand on his back, and Bijan's just that good. That's why I said, Desmond Ridder, don't you ever take a touchdown from Bijan again. We will come for you.
Yeah. So, Bijan finished 11.8 fantasy points, played 61% of the snaps. Something I want to touch on because in our preview episode, I did say Tyler Algier would outscore Matt Breida, which he did.
Yeah.
They both were horrendous, but he outscored him, and I told you he would. So I had to touch on that. I'm not even going to touch on Algier's stats and everything because he is not a relevant running back too, but he did outscore Breida. When we look at the receiving room, there's only a couple guys to talk about. Drake London saw some good volume. He had 9 targets, 6 catches, 78 yards, 14.6 fantasy points. Very solid week for Drake London. I mean, if Desmond Ridder can start throwing the ball a bit more consistently, which I'm not sure if he can, but if he can, we saw how the weapons benefited. Kyle Pitts, the Drake London USC jersey, yes sir, absolutely. Kyle Pitts, we saw get 11 targets, 7 catches, 87 yards, 15.7 fantasy points, his first double-digit week. Something I don't understand.
Arthur Smith is a war criminal.
He is Kyle Pitts, 11 targets, 7 catches. He only played 53% of snaps. Why is he only out there 53% of the time? It's Kyle Pitts. He's one of the most talented tight ends in the league.
Because Arthur Smith. I don't know.
He's only out there 53% of the time because Jonnu Smith is out there 64% of the time, getting 7 targets, catching 6 of them for 67 yards. He had 10.7 fantasy points. He lost a fumble, but it just doesn't make sense. We're just seeing through the season, no matter what, Jonnu Smith is going to be there and awkwardly eating away at Kyle Pitts. I mean,
and what pisses me off is Jonnu Smith is not a bad tight end. Like, if we remember a few years ago when he was on Tennessee, he was a good option. But it's just like, this isn't where I want you to be good.
No.
Go back to New England.
Yeah.
They need you. Go somewhere else. Go Las Vegas. Go I don't care. Get out of Atlanta.
No, absolutely.
They have a tight end.
Yeah.
God.
But
that team pisses me off to no end when it comes to fantasy football.
You just never know.
No, you don't. The one thing, I got to say, week 1, Drake London dropped a dud. Since then, 18.7, 5.1 against the Lions, then 11.8, 14.6.
He's the only receiver there. He's the only receiving threat there.
I'm feeling a lot more comfortable week in and week out with Drake London, especially like this week, for example. I had no choice, but it was, I could have flexed Downs. I had him or Josh Downs, and I decided to go London and he came through. For some odd reason, had a 22-yard pass, which, okay, but Other than that, man, it's like if he's at least getting targets, God, that makes me happy to see.
Yeah.
Like, that's all I ask.
Mm-hmm.
And he got it done without a touchdown, which is what we did not know if he could do.
Yeah. I mean,
But yeah,
that's all I had for that one. Lions or the Falcons pulled it out. Their defense came through. Offense woke
Young
up a little bit.
Woo.
Yeah,
Young
absolutely.
Woo. Great kicker option.
Yeah.
If I doubt he's available, but if for some reason someone dropped him, hey.
Yeah.
And with that, I mean, I just wanted to say before we go into this game, Adrian, I'm sorry. You don't deserve this.
No.
The Patriots have scored 3 points in 2 weeks. I want to pour one out for everybody who drafted Ramondre Stevenson.
It's done.
It's looking bad, to say the least. And I don't know if you could start him for the near future. I mean, like I've been saying, the one thing we loved about Ramondre Stevenson was his pass catching. Zeke was the lead target like he led the team in targets with 4, caught all 4 for 17 yards. He was 8 for 21 on the ground. Mondre was 8 for 24, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Had 1 target, did not catch it. Hunter Henry, we thought was a somewhat viable tight end. I'm removing myself from that opinion at this point. Anybody on the New England Patriots, I don't believe you can't start at this point. The only ones worth keeping on your roster are Ramondre and Stevenson. And that's it.
Yeah.
It's the same guy. I mean, hell, if you want to roster Zeke because your running backs are hurt that bad, then by all means go ahead. But you know what you're going to get, and you can't expect anything better.
Yeah.
They've gotten outscored 72-3 in the past 2 weeks. They've been down by a lot and been incapable of doing anything at all. I mean, there's not much more to say, guys. I'm just going to move on to the Saints side of the ball. Do not start any player on the Patriots until they show they can score a damn touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
On to the Saints. Derek Carr, 18 for 26, 183, 2 touchdowns. I think with like that low yardage we're still seeing, he's still kind of dealing with that shoulder. As it improves, we'll see more out of Chris Olave. This was him. He had 9.2 PPR points only because he got that touchdown. Other than that, he was 2 catches on 5 targets for 12 yards.
Yeah.
He's just, like I said, it's going to be, when Derek Carr's shoulder gets right and he's back in form and everything, I think it'll be better for Olave. We know how good Olave is, the targets that he should be demanding. But hey, it's something that we talked about. A healthy Michael Thomas is probably the most solid floor play in fantasy football.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, another week, 4 catches, 65 yards, 10.5 points in PPR. You know what you're going to get out of him. You know you're probably not going to get any more, but he's safe. And safe sometimes is better than taking a gamble on a Michael Wilson who gets you 1 catch for 18 yards. So that, I mean, you know, not too shiny, it's not a sexy play, but I'll take the 10 points on any given week.
Mm-hmm.
We saw Alvin Kamara. He's back. 22 rushes for 80 yards, a touchdown, 3 catches for 17, gives you 18.7 PPR points. This is why we waited the 4 weeks. Alvin's back. There's not too much to say about it. The one thing that was pretty interesting, though, is Kendre Miller stepped in and actually played some good football. Let's see. He 36% of the snaps. Alvin, the 63. I think Alvin is going to stay well above that 50% snap share. When Jamal comes back, I think it'll be interesting to see who kind of spells him, whether or not it's Kendre or if it's Jamal. Because I mean, Kendre did look decent. He had 12 rushes for 37 yards, and he caught 4 passes for 53, which is, you know, I'd rather see that go to Alvin, being an Alvin owner. But hey, like, it's He gave you 13.4 or 13 PPR points. It's not bad. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I don't know what's going to happen when Jamal comes back, if he's going to be that RB2, if it's going to be Jamal or just a committee. But a guy definitely, he was skilled in college at, where do you go, TCU.
Yeah.
Definitely a guy worth keeping your eye on
Yeah.
at the very least. And I guess it's a part of our job to mention that Foster Moreau had a touchdown. And that's all I have for this game.
Yeah, I mean, you have your surefire starts. You have Kamara. Michael Thomas I like in like a flex role, depending how deep your receiver room is. If you aren't starting Thomas, honestly, you could probably package him with someone else and get someone a decent upgrade because you know Thomas is getting you solid points week in and week out. Olave's hurting the most with this Derek Carr injury. I think his arm's starting to get better probably by next week, hopefully for Olave owners. You know, we'll see him get back to form, but that's really it. Patriots, no comments. Nothing to say.
All right, and that'll take us into our next game where the Titans went into Indianapolis and the Colts finally snapped their home loss streak. We saw Anthony Richardson get hurt fairly early in this one. He only played 22 snaps before he went out, and Gardner Minshew played the remaining 44 on offense for the Colts. We know that Minshew is a decent starting quarterback in the NFL. He's capable of getting the ball to Josh Downs and Michael Pittman, who are at this point, you know, Josh Downs is someone especially that you kind of have to roster.
Mm-hmm.
He's very clearly the wide receiver 2 in this offense. It is not Alec Pierce. And he got six targets, caught all 6 for 97 yards. He got 15.7 points on a week without a touchdown. That's something we absolutely love to see. I think with Gardner Minshew in there, it might be even a little better for Josh Downs and Michael Pittman as well. We saw, you know, when the Ravens and Colts played, you know, Pittman was getting all kinds of targets. He likes throwing the ball to Pittman and Downs. I think the funniest thing that we saw in this game was the return of Jonathan Taylor meant a Zach Moss blow up. Obviously, we knew that the first week Jonathan Taylor's back, they're not going to just give him everything. They're going to work him in. But hell, Zach Moss went stupid.
Mm-hmm.
He 23 rushes, 165 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 catches for 30 yards. Guy finished with 33.5 PPR points. To me, Jonathan Taylor is probably going to be a league winner. If Zach Moss is doing this, he is a good running back. Do not get me wrong. But to me, that shows this Colts offensive line is very well built.
Oh, yeah.
And we knew that. But, I mean, if Zach Moss is getting... This game, he only had 6 rushes, 1 catch. Only finished with 4.4 points. I wouldn't have really considered starting him this week, especially against the Tennessee defense, which they had only given up 70 yards per game on the ground until this game, where Zach Moss just completely destroyed that. So it was impressive, truly. I like the Colts running game moving forward.
Yeah.
If they continue to work in Moss, I don't know if he's going to completely lose his relevance because he's still doing well. I think it might be something akin to Miami where there might be 2 relevant running backs.
Yeah.
But that's something we're going to have to wait and see. Minshew, I don't know if I'm necessarily starting him or looking at him as a quarterback option for fantasy. But like I said, he's a guy that can get it done for your receivers. So while Richardson is out for however much time he misses, another thing we'll touch on in the injury episode, but, you know, I'm not losing any confidence in the pass catchers in Indianapolis. On the other side of the ball, however, we finally saw the big D-Hop game.
Yeah.
He was, you know, we waited all this time. And for me, it was like, okay, I don't understand why he necessarily went to Tennessee because we know what that passing volume's like. But he got it done this week. Let me see. Actually, or yeah, he 11 targets, which you kind of would figure being the guy,
Mm-hmm.
that's what he should get most weeks. But he caught 8 of them for 140. And it was like, finally, man. Finally. Because Tannehill has not been looking good at all. But coming into this game, you get a 22-point week out of D-Hop, and it's a breath of fresh air. This week, Tannehill 23 for 34, 264, no touchdowns, but a pick, and rushed twice for 12 yards. Not another quarterback that is not a fantasy option,
No.
but it does feel a little better seeing him provide enough to make D-Hop, in that wide receiver 2 category.
Mm-hmm.
The big thing in this one is we're seeing every week Derrick Henry and Tyjae Spears just get closer and closer. Even from week 1, reading the snap percent. Derrick Henry, 30 snaps, Tyjae 34. Week 2, Derrick Henry 46, Tyjae 24. Week 3, Derrick Henry 18, Tyjae 27. Week 4, Derrick Henry 39, Tyjae 35. This week, 37-31.
Yeah.
This is not a good look for Derrick Henry owners. Tyjae Spears, especially when it comes to like the passing downs and passing situations, they're not looking to Derrick Henry. Tyjae Spears is quicker. Tyjae Spears is a good receiving back. Derrick Henry still caught 3 passes for 19 yards. Tyjae Spears caught 4 for 35.
Mm-hmm.
And he got 5 targets. Henry got 3. Tyjae Spears finished with 16.9 points in a PPR setting, and Henry only finished with 9.2. This is not the first week that we've seen Tyjae Spears outscore Derrick Henry. And it's, at this point, it's not something that, it's just, no, you actually have to seriously look at this and take note. And I mean, Tyjae Spears for me is someone that the way the running backs are looking, I'm rostering Tyjae Spears.
Oh, yeah.
He got a touchdown in this one, only ran the ball 7 times for 34 yards, but Henry ran it 13 times for 43. So Tyjae Spears ran the ball 6 less times, got 9 less yards, and finished with the touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
It's scary hours for Derrick Henry, man. I mean, we've been calling this, but it's really coming to fruition. And it is not. So if you have Derrick Henry right now, I'm looking to move on and upgrade to another running back that I'm at least more confident is going to get a majority of the work in that backfield on every given week.
Mm-hmm.
Derrick Henry is not game script independent at this point in his career anymore. And then I guess another guy that we have to mention, just because he got 9 targets in this game, which I don't know if that'll continue, because I think, they weren't really able to run the ball like how they wanted to. That's kind of the identity of the Tennessee Titans, is they are very much a run-first offense. But getting to the point is Chigakonkwo.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a tight end that we've talked about in the beginning of the season. We were looking at as like, hey, this guy can probably finish as a top 12 tight end, but they haven't done anything in the pass offense. This is the first week he actually got a large chunk of targets, but he only caught 5 of them for 33 yards. I mean, 8.3 points for tight end. It's not going to kill you, but granted, this week they probably had to pass more than they wanted to, and I don't see this like replicating too many times. But yeah, that's really all I got for this one. And if you got anything else to touch on.
No, I mean, just what we said, after Derrick Henry had that big week against the Bengals, we kind of said this is the week to sell him, because we've just seen that snap share. Some weeks Henry gets a little more snap share than others, but what we've seen on a more consistent basis is that's not the case. Like Schiff said, Derrick Henry, just at this point in his career, he used to be a must start no matter the matchup. That is no longer the case. Tyjae Spears is showing crazy upside. I mean, that's just a tough decision to make, but you can't keep holding on to him because of the name. If you can move Derrick Henry, I agree. Weigh your options. See, I mean, don't trade him for pennies, but If you can get a fair trade for him, I absolutely like it. D-Hop is the only start in that receiver room. Just talent alone, no matter how bad Tannehill is, D-Hop has shown capability to make it happen. And he finally, yeah, had that huge week. On the Colts side of the ball, I'm interested to see how long it takes for them to ramp up Jonathan Taylor. I mean, we saw what happened with Josh Jacobs. It takes a while to knock that rust off. But the difference with Jonathan Taylor is I don't see him getting the crazy volume out of the backfield that Josh Jacobs got, which kind of saved his weeks early on. So I'm curious to see. I mean, the Colts' next couple games are at Jacksonville, against Cleveland, and then against the Saints. So I know he's going to get ramped up, but Zach Moss has looked very good. Again, if they make Zach Moss look that good, how good could Jonathan Taylor look? But I just, it's tough. I don't know if I would throw him in the starting lineup this coming week unless you absolutely had to. I'd kind of wait until we actually see, because I'm sure a lot of people threw him in this week and were surprised to see him play 15% of the snaps. So, I mean,
Yeah, it was probably not the best thing to see, but also something you kind of have to expect. I mean, it's a lot different when you're a running back coming off of the pup compared to like when you're Cooper Cup and you know what I mean. It's an ankle for a running back, because that you are planting and cutting off of that. That's why you haven't seen Saquon playing, because the ankle for a running back is a very big deal. So yeah, we might have to wait a few weeks until Jonathan Taylor is really back to being that Jonathan Taylor that we have known and loved. But
it
once
is
he gets
coming.
back to that point, it's to the moon.
Yeah, it absolutely is coming. It's just a matter of when. That'll take me to my last morning game, which is the Carolina Panthers traveling to Detroit to play the Lions. The Lions beat them pretty easily, 42-24. On the Panthers side of the ball, Bryce Young didn't have a bad fantasy day. He was 25 of 41, 247 yards, 3 touchdowns, threw 2 interceptions, but still finished 20.2 fantasy points. Very solid week. Through the air, Adam Thielen, again, absolute must start. By far the number one there. 13 targets, 11 catches for 107, a touchdown, 27.7. I mean, I'm surprised to see. I'm happy to see it though. Adam Thielen's always been super talented. It's been his health. He's been banged up the past couple years, missing time, and he has looked amazing for the Panthers. I mean, as the vet, kind of leading the way for Mingo. Chark, he has shown he's very capable. DJ Chark again, another one. The thing with the Panthers, they have the 3 main receivers that are out there like 80+% of the time, which is Thielen, Chark, and Mingo. Chark finished 3 catches, 42 yards, got the touchdown on 6 targets, 13.2, solid fantasy week. Mingo, coming back, had 5 catches for 48 yards, 7 targets, 9.8 fantasy points. I mean, I like rostering Chark maybe, like super deep on the bench. It's just tough because there's a bunch of guys. There's the Josh Downses out there. It's just tough when you're looking at that last roster spot. But Chark, I mean, it's a tough one. But the other, their tight ends are irrelevant. Hurst had a good week 1. Since then, he's not viable at all. Tommy Tremble caught a touchdown, his second catch of the season.
And like Mingo right now, and like hell, I already forgot the guy. Terrace Marshall. They're like best ball guys.
Yeah. In a deeper league, a 12-man, you're probably rostering Chark a 10-man. I think he's like just missing the cut, but again, something to, I guess, he's a guy to keep an eye on the waiver, see how he does as the season progresses, if he can continue to, give you some double-digit weeks. But as of now, I mean, there's probably better options. Speaking of better options, Miles Sanders, 7 carries, 32 yards, 1 target, didn't catch it, lost a fumble, 1.2 fantasy points, 46% of snaps. This is not Philadelphia, and Miles Sanders is not thriving like he did in Philly. We're seeing Chuba Hubbard. I mean, even Chuba this week, 9 carries, 35 yards, 1 catch for 0 yards, 2 targets, played 48% of snaps, 4.5%, 4.5 fantasy points. The tough part is Miles Sanders hasn't looked dominant enough to earn the lion's share of those snaps. When they get down, like they will a lot, they have not won a game. We see Chuba come in and just eat away at the value Miles Sanders has. He's another one I'm scared of. Miles Sanders, I don't know if I'm comfortable starting him, I guess at least for now.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that the Lions are fairly good against the run. Um, so, but still, it's an offense that we know you're not going to get too many opportunities at the goal line.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not going to be very many chances that Miles Sanders is falling into the end zone on any given week, which really I mean, it makes it hard because especially when you have a back that seemingly is a better pass catcher, well, that's kind of the only thing that we had to like anchor ourselves on with Miles Sanders was okay, he's going to get catches out of the backfield, but if those are going to Chuba, then this becomes a version of just a muddled backfield that I don't really want a part of. Until we see something, you can't drop Miles Sanders by any means.
No,
But at this
no.
point, his trade value is on the floor. It's just really hard to see that and have any positive thoughts just given the situation, everything that's going on in Carolina. They're going to be constantly down in games. They're turning the ball over a lot. And this is just not a recipe for success for running back.
No, and through the first 3 weeks, Miles Sanders 6 targets, 5 targets, 9 targets, and then the last two 3 targets in one. So, again, yeah, obviously you don't drop Miles Sanders. They go to
Like he's
Miami.
been dealing with somewhat of an injury too. Like he was questionable all of last 2 weeks.
Yeah,
But man,
it's just tough to see. And then, I mean, on the other side of the ball, I'll be the first to admit I was wrong about Jared Goff fantasy wise this week. I did not think they would have to pass the ball, which I mean, I guess they didn't necessarily have to, but they did with great success. Jared
and
Goff
that shit
was,
lost me money.
yeah, he was 20 of 28, 236 yards, 3 touchdowns, rushed for a touchdown, 27.4 fantasy points. He had a fantastic week. And the Panthers were solid against the pass defense coming in, but I mean, they got lit up altogether. Through the air, Josh Reynolds led the way. Or for the wide receivers, led the way. 4 catches, 76 yards, 5 targets, had a touchdown, 17.6 fantasy points, only played 47% of snaps. We know he was questionable coming in. He did roll,
Still
and
dealing with that groin.
yeah, and he had a solid week. Sam Laporta, target wise was a quiet week for Sam Laporta. He only had 4, but again, caught 3 of them, 47 yards, 2 of them for touchdowns. 19.7.
Yeah, baby.
Sam Laporta does not matter the matchup. I am rolling Sam Laporta. He is a must-start tight end. He has looked by far the best of the rookie tight ends. I mean, he is
Oh yeah.
absolutely thriving. Not much to say more on Laporta. I mean, he is the guy.
He's
Uh,
him.
Jamison Williams returned from suspension. Didn't do too much at all. He had 3 targets, caught 2 of them for 2 yards, had 2.2 fantasy
So he did
points.
do too much.
Yeah, a bunch of twos, honestly. He also played 47% of the snaps. Uh, Really quick, Marvin Jones and Khalif Raymond. Khalif Raymond had 7.5. Marvin Jones had 4. I'm only mentioning them. I don't think.
Khalif Raymond is a better option than Marvin
Oh,
Jones. Do not.
absolutely.
Yeah, it's
Absolutely. But
like.
when Amon-Ra comes back, you're going to have Amon-Ra, Sam Laporta, and Josh Reynolds, and then we're going to see how Jamison Williams fits into that, and Khalif Raymond and Marvin Jones will take the hit. But, had to mention them. And
Mhm.
in The run game, David Montgomery did what we expected him to do. He rushed it 19 times, 109 yards for a touchdown, caught 2 catches for 20 yards on 6 targets, so he saw a lot of targets. 20.9 fantasy points, 75% of snaps. Exactly what we expected from him. Craig Reynolds had 7 carries, 52 yards, a tutty, 11.2 fantasy points, 22% of snaps. When Jahmyr Gibbs comes back, Craig Reynolds completely irrelevant. But the Lions are easy when you're looking at your must-starts. You have David Montgomery and Amon-Ra, Sam Laporta as your absolute must-starts. Jahmyr Gibbs, I just want them to give him volume. I mean,
he like Josh Reynolds as a flex play at this point.
Yeah. Either of those
It's
you can't go wrong. Jahmyr Gibbs, Josh Reynolds, they have crazy upside. But I mean, that's all I had on the Lions. I feel like they're a high-powered offense, and David Montgomery is just this year's Jamal Williams. Also on the Lions. So, I mean...
Yeah, just a better version of him.
Yeah.
This next game just pains me to talk about, but this is what we're here for. The Ravens absolutely squandered the opportunity to beat the Steelers and go 3-0 on road division games to start the season. But the coaching was piss poor in this game. I mean, this isn't for me to just talk about the Ravens, but it was pathetic. I mean, you have the opportunity to go up 13-3 at the end of the first half, and they somehow have a miscommunication, and the snap goes off. They turn the ball over. Everything that could have went wrong for the Ravens in this game did go wrong. Lamar Jackson, I still have ultimate confidence in, but as far as a fantasy asset, I'm starting to question it a little bit more, and it's not due to his skill. He had 10 dropped passes, 3 of which should have been touchdowns.
Rashad Bateman, easiest catch.
Rashad Bateman drops one in the end zone. Mark Andrews drops one in the end zone. Zay Flowers dropped 2 30-plus yard passes. Nelson Aguilar it's Nelson Aguilar. What do you know? Drops a walk-in touchdown. I mean, these are things, it's like, anybody can say what they want about Lamar's accuracy, Lamar's, his viability as a starting quarterback in the NFL, whether or not he can. I call bullshit on all of that, because as a quarterback in the NFL, the one thing that you are supposed to do is put the ball in your receiver's hands. And after that, you can't go run and catch it for them. Yeah. Better weeks may be to come. They play the Tennessee Titans this upcoming week in London, who have been very porous against the pass, but they've also been very good against the run. I don't know how that's going to look against this Ravens offense at this point. I don't really know how to gauge it. I know you're starting Mark Andrews, you're starting Zay Flowers. That's it as far as pass catchers go. The running backs, I have no actual knowledge of what they're going to do on any given week.
Yeah.
The prior week, last week against the Browns, you have 7 offensive snaps for Justice Hill, 40 for Gus Edwards. This week, when Justice Hill was still on the injury report all week, with not just the foot, this time a shoulder too, Justice Hill gets 56% of the snaps and Gus only gets 43. I don't understand how they're deciding to use these guys. It doesn't make sense to me. Therefore, I'm just saying screw it. Honestly, I have no confidence moving forward that you're going to know what's going to happen on any given week, unless there's an injury, which God forbid. But you just don't know. I mean, it doesn't make sense, and I can't try to make sense of it. So like I said, you're still starting Lamar. I just hope that they figure out how to catch the damn ball, and then Lamar's going to be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's all I got for the Ravens, man. If you got anything.
No, it's that simple. Lamar, Zay, Mark Andrews, the running backs, I'm shying away from starting one because we just don't know until we see consistent week in, week out if there's separation made. But honestly, I don't think there will be. So I mean, that's really it.
At this point, I'm stashing Keaton Mitchell on my IR and calling it as far as that
Yeah,
goes. Uh, um, away from that travesty, the Steelers side of the ball, pedestrian. Kenny
yeah.
Pickett, 18 for 32, 224, a touchdown. I mean, 6 rushes for -6 yards, 12.2 points. You have the push-off merchant George Pickens, got 6 catches on 10 targets for 130 and a touchdown, 26.6 points. I didn't like the start this week. I mean,
We saw him struggle against the Texans.
we did. I mean, realistically, the guy doesn't get separation unless he's pushing off. So that all depends on whether or not you're playing in Pittsburgh, apparently. And the refs decide to throw the flag. Because, I mean, every big catch he was such a clear, extended push off. But that's not what I'm going to digress on because that's not what this show is about. That's just me being salty. So, but with that, I mean, as long as Deontay Johnson's out, George Pickens is the only viable starter
Yeah.
on the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean the whole entire team. Jalen Warren is somebody that you might be able to flex on. I mean, he's looking like the better running back by far in Pittsburgh. But the problem is they're not going to move on from him. Something like we saw with the Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott. The thing holding Jalen Warren back is the fact that the Steelers still are going to give Najee volume, and they're still going to give him a large amount of volume. It might not be the best. It might not look. I mean, you know, they're getting closer every week. I mean, last week we saw 49% and 49% from Warren and Harris. But I wanted to note with that, it was a lot of garbage time and a lot of snaps for Warren came on that final drive, and it was a whole bunch of dump offs and stuff. That was not the case this week. Warren was actually much more effective. In the crucial moments, Warren was catching passes, breaking tackles, hurdling people. Warren looks like the better running. Whether or not the Steelers actually continue to move forward and give him the volume based on how he's been looking, another thing that I just don't know. I'd like to say that they will. One thing that will keep him alive is he is an amazing pass catcher out of the backfield. So I don't think he'll burn you on any given week. That's why I think he's a decent flex option. I wouldn't exactly say he's a viable starter just because the Steelers can go out on any given week and put up 3 points. So with that, that's going to be hard to start anybody except for, like George Pickens. You kind of have no choice at what he's doing. Oh, and they got a bye next week, so you're actually not going to have to worry about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, other than that, these are not two fantasy relevant teams aside from a few players. You got the kickers on each team, which at this point, the Ravens aren't even kicking field goals like that, so Justin Tucker's losing by ability. But the Ravens defense and the Steelers defense, I probably like almost more than anyone aside from Lamar, Mark, Zay, Jalen Warren, Pickens.
Yeah. And I mean, there's not too much to say. Yeah, I like George Pickens. Again, they have a bye, but I like George Pickens. I like Deontay Johnson. And at this point, that's really it on that offense. Freiermuth has, I don't know why, but kind of just faded into the abyss, at least for now. Najee.
Yeah, I mean, Freiermuth is out right now. I don't know how long he will be out for.
Yeah.
With that, they did. I mean, Cam Hayward apparently, or no. Not Cam Hayward. Connor. Not Cam, but Connor.
Connor? Yeah, Connor Hayward.
Connor Hayward seems to be the guy who's more of a. I mean, they have Darnell Washington in there, but it's kind of like as an extra offensive lineman. He's not much of an offensive threat. He's not very fast, and he's a big body, but, you know, 3 guys can get to him like 2 seconds, gang tackle him. He's going to get like 3 yards. Hayward is decent, not an option that I'd really consider too much. I don't know how long he'll be out, but Freiermuth wasn't even really giving us that much. So why would I want the Steelers backup tight end?
Yeah.
And that's really all I got for this one. 2 teams that I'd probably just prefer to stay away from.
Yeah. Other than I do like the Steelers defense. They're ranked number 3 right now. Surprisingly, their worst fantasy week came against Houston and they have played Baltimore, Cleveland, SF, Vegas. Their worst week was against Houston. So Steelers defense, but other than that, yeah, George Pickens, Deontay, that's really it.
Yeah, man. It was a rough week for Ravens fans, Baltimore fans in general. I guess the Orioles ended up losing on that same night.
Yeah.
Glad I don't watch the Orioles. But yeah, guys, this is we're gonna take a little break, come back with the second part of this episode, and there's a whole lot more to talk about. So stay tuned.
Until next time.